Do we have, like, guardian angels? I hear that all the time is like, "You better thank your guardian angel," and I'm just kinda curious,
Yeah.
is that a thing?
Uh, yes and no. This is an interesting one, and of course, I knew it was going to come up in this conversation. And so let me walk you through kind of what I know and what I don't know about this one. So
Yeah.
again, the Bible's not a book about the story of angels, so we just don't have enough information to say anything with real clarity, other than they exist and they were created by God for a purpose. And now many of them are opposing the reason that they were created. So the guardian angel question. So where that comes from probably initially is in Psalm 91. And I don't think I typed that one out, but let me look it up because this would be worth
Yeah.
quoting for everyone following along here. So this is Psalm 91. Actually, my wife, Kim, has been reading through the Psalms, and she had a couple of Psalms that she had questions. She was eager to know like what I was going to learn about this stuff. So in Psalm 91, verse 11, it says, he being God, will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all of your ways. They, the angels, will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Now, that's interesting. That sounds like it even uses the term guard, like angels exist to guard you, protect you. That sounds like a guardian angel idea. Now, first thing that's fascinating about that is Satan himself quotes those verses when he is tempting Jesus in Matthew 4 and in the parallel passages.
Okay.
He's trying to say, let's just see if this really works. So why don't you cast yourself down so that you'll be like, blown up on the rocks, and then the angels will come and rescue you, because isn't that what the scriptures say in Psalm 91? He quotes Psalm 91, and Jesus says, don't put God to the test, and moves on. So maybe that is just a reference to the Messiah, to Jesus. I don't know. The
Interesting.
question is, does it apply beyond Jesus? Satan thought it applied directly to Jesus for sure in Matthew 4. So then that raises the question about us. So here's what's fascinating. So part of this idea comes from a story in the book of Acts. It's a true story relating to the apostle Peter. So like Peter and James, the brother of John, the two sons of thunder. So all three of them were kind of Peter, James, and John were like Jesus's three best buddies. And now the early church has started. Jesus is back up in heaven, and the Christian movement is starting to get active opposition against it from the local leaders. And so Herod ends up arresting James and then just executes him, like willy-nilly, just kills him. And then they notice that, the people are like, oh, that was awesome, do that again. So he arrests Peter, and you assume that Peter's just going to go down. He's just going to be executed next. So the church gathers to pray for Peter. I'm sure they gathered to pray for James too, but for whatever reason, and there's a real mystery in this, God just lets James' life be extinguished. But Peter, on the other hand, as the church is praying, God sends an angel and releases Peter from prison, walks him all the way out, to safety, out beyond the prison. And then he goes rushing immediately to the church that has a door locked where they're praying. And he knocks on the door. And this girl, we have her name. Her name is Rhoda for some reason. But this young girl, Rhoda, goes to the door and goes, who is it? And Peter says, it's me, it's Peter. Now, the church is in that room praying for Peter's protection and hopeful release. They're getting what they prayed for. Peter is at the door, and Rhoda hears the voice. She's so excited that it's Peter that she forgets to open the door. The people praying, saying, stop praying, stop praying. The answer's at the door. Peter's there. And their response is, that's impossible. And then they say something that is so crazy, it's just hilarious to me. It says, it must be his angel. Now, two things are going on that I want to point out for our listeners here. Number one, I love that story because it reminds us that you don't need hardly any faith in order for your prayers to be effective, because they were praying for Peter's release and got it. But when they got the answer, they disbelieved it, which means they had almost no faith behind their prayers. But at least they prayed, so they had that much faith. They at least prayed. But they didn't believe that what they were praying for was going to happen. When the answer showed up at the door, they were like, no, that's impossible. So that's a good takeaway in my mind. But the other thing is, okay, they're going to conclude it couldn't be him because that's impossible, but it must be his angel. Like, well, let that person in then. Why wouldn't you? But here's my point about guardian angels. that's one of the stories that might suggest, well, was that Peter's guardian angel?
Hmm.
It's
Wow.
his, they said. So we just don't know because Luke just moves on. He doesn't say, let me explain what we're talking about here. And they were thinking it was his guardian angel. No, he just moves on to
Yeah.
what happens. So there's that. Then there's one more reference that feeds this idea of guardian angels. That's in Matthew 18. And it's Jesus has a bunch of what are called little ones around him. It might have been literally little kids around him. Or it could be a reference maybe to people that are little or young in their faith. We're not sure. But in Matthew 18, and let me quote this one directly too, because I don't want us to miss this one. Kind of blows your mind a little bit too. So Matthew 18, and this is verse 10, where Jesus is speaking. He says, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you that their angels in heaven, always see the face of my Father in heaven." And then he moves on. He doesn't explain it. So he says, here are these little ones. And he says, their angels are in heaven. So what do you mean? They're like, do they each have their own angel? That's what we don't know. Or is
Wow.
it like a bunch of angels that just their job is to watch over little ones in some collective way? We don't know. But the way Jesus frames his comment there, it sounds like these little ones have angels watching over them,
Wow.
aka guarding them or serving as guardian angels. So that's why I say yes and no. I mean, there's enough in the Bible that suggests angels are around, and in part they provide protection and whatever for at least people that belong to God, for sure. And then there's one statement that just comes and goes where it's like, tell me more, that maybe then brings it down to the most practical level for everybody. So this is in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 13. And man, I wish the writer would have expanded on this a little bit so that we would kind of know, what does that mean? But here's what it says, if I can find it. Where did the book of Hebrews go? There it is. Now, the book of Hebrews mentions angels a bunch right at the beginning, trying to help sort out that, Jesus in being human was lower than the angels, but then as the Son of God and raising from the dead, he's above the angels. And so there's a lot of talk about angels going on in Hebrews 1, but then at the tail end of the chapter, the writer just throws in this little tidbit and then moves on as if to say, here, have fun with this. He asked it as a rhetorical question. He says, are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation?
Huh.
In the form of a question. Now, rhetorically, that's probably requiring a yes answer. He's probably posing the question knowing that the answer is yes, as if to say, this is what angels do. This is their job description. They are ministering spirits that serve and are sent by God specifically to serve those who will inherit salvation. That's people who believe in Jesus.
Okay.
Now, does that mean you have a personal one assigned to you? Is there like a guardian angel for Chad Herman? I don't know.
Wow.
But you've probably been ministered to by angels. You probably just didn't know.
I got to tell you, there's
because they tend to operate undercover. So that's where it's not like, hey, an angel's here, let's talk.
yeah.
It's just you get help that you need in a moment of need, and in some cases, if not most cases, that could be God sending an angel to serve you in those moments.
Wow.
That's what that question says, but it doesn't unpack it.
Because Dave, you keep saying this, and I think it's so important to repeat it. It's because the Bible doesn't feel it necessary to talk about these things because it's not what it's for.
It's not a book about the spirit world. It's not a book about angels. It's a book about human beings and what God is trying to do with those that he created uniquely in his image.
So
now, we squandered that, and the whole story of the Bible is how God is going to fix the mess that we made of our existence as humanity, and he wants to restore us. And so angels figure into our story, but they have their own story,
wow.
and it's not in the Bible. So we just get these little snippets that's like, oh my gosh, that's fascinating. What do I do with that?
And God, the God of the universe, is the hero of the angel story as well. God is still the star of the show.